The Marvel Cinematic Universe. The biggest pop culture movement since the Beatles, $22.5 billion at the box office, and we found the one guy who doesn't have a clue what we're talking about. With two fellow MCU nerds to help guide his hand along the way, one thing is for certain, we're with him until the end of the line. Welcome to Colin Brain versus the MCU.
On your left, hello and welcome to your favourite MCU podcast designed for your ear holes. Some said it was impossible. They said it couldn't be done. But here we are at Phase 3, baby, and what a way to kick off Phase 3, but with none other than Captain America Civil War. Before we jump into what I predict is going to be quite a long and eventful podcast, I really should introduce my fellow co-hosts. Now, I don't know if you've ever listened to a podcast before, but it's usually not this many jingles. Unless that podcast is Colin Brain versus the MCU, and one of your co-hosts is Robert Trott. Rob, say hello.
Hello. Although that's not my name, is it, George?
Is it not? No, well, I have it noted. Mention Rob's stupid name, but that was coming later, so let's do it now. So, shall we even let the audience know, because I'm pretty sure they know by now that we all do this over Zoom, and Rob every week changes his Zoom name for every single episode. Rob, who are you this week?
So for the Captain America films, we've had Fucky Barnes.
Brilliant.
Alexander Fierce.
Fantastic.
And it's the third one, so I've got to go with Cap himself. Steve Todgers.
Todgers. Brilliant.
Classic.
Thank you, sir. As mature as ever. So, and in regards to my final co-host for this evening, thank the gods he's only in a podcast about the MCU and not actually in the MCU, because the line, "Where are you from, kid?" Thetford, Norfolk, sure doesn't sound anywhere near as cool as Queens or Brooklyn. It's Colin Brain. Colin, say hello.
Hello.
Hello. So, Rob, how are you this week?
I am good. I've been buying up a load of non-MCU Marvel films. So I got some funny looks buying. I don't know, is it a spoiler if we give titles for these ones?
Nah.
No, not if they're not MCU. Go for it.
Yeah, so I bought X-Men Wolverine Origins, 50p.
Woohoo.
Yeah, so, still too expensive. Yeah.
X-Men Apocalypse, £1.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll go with 50p for that one.
I would as well, yeah, but, you know, beggars can't be choosers. And The Amazing Spider-Man.
Oh.
That
and how
was
much was that?
£2.
Oh, okay.
2 discs, though. Pound a disc.
I'll give it. I'll allow it.
X-Men Wolverine Origins came with a digital copy, which wasn't ultraviolet. It's on an extra disc that you then can cash in via iTunes. So if either of you boys want a digital copy.
Well, who knows? I don't like to be nasty about films, but it'll be interesting when we get round to that in one of our bonus episodes way off in the future, because that is one of the only films I've ever walked out of the cinema to. I couldn't hack anymore.
Which one? Which one was that?
X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Oh, yeah, I didn't see that one.
Oh, you will.
Oh, it's... So will I, yes. So, Colin.
Yes.
Here's a question for you.
Okay.
If tomorrow, let's say the podcast was to end, like me or Rob were both to suffer like horrendous fates from the Winter Soldier himself, or just by crossing a road, which is probably the more likely scenario for our untimely deaths.
Yeah.
Would you continue to watch the MCU? So, deaths aside, if for whatever reason the podcast ceased to exist, would you still check out the next few movies?
No.
Oh, fucking hell.
I'd put it in my will that you have to in order to get some sort of treasure.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Brilliant.
if one of you guys died, then I'd maybe do it just out of like a respect, you know, and a
Right,
memory
if one of us,
thing.
you'd continue it in our memory, but if
Yeah,
we both died, you'd fuck it off.
No. I mean, like you said, if neither of you died but the podcast just ended, would I carry on watching them? Probably not. But that doesn't mean I'm not enjoying them. It's just I don't watch films, so I'm not going to just sit there and watch a film for no reason.
Fantastic. I don't know whether this upsets me or not. Okay, thank you for your honesty. And then, Rob, I've got a quick question for you as well.
Right.
This is an odd question. Do you ever actually see the MCU ending? Because it's very much like it feels like a runaway train at the moment. As of recording, we are in phase 4. Colin, you'll get there soon. And it just feels like there's so much momentum. There's always new projects being announced. Like, are we ever going to see this end? Do I have to stay alive this long? Because let's be honest, that clock is ticking.
It's like Kevin Smith when he had his heart attack and he was worried he wasn't going to get to see a particular film in the MCU. I don't know. I think it would take... It just goes down to people keep spending money on it. Mm-hmm. Like, if you get to a point where there's, like, 3 or even 2 financial flops in a row, I know it's Disney and they got money to throw at things, but they might just go, nah, you know what? It would take people not going to see them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, surely it's going to get to a point with these films where, I mean, you can't have Iron Man and Captain America and stuff in anymore just because the actors are going to start aging. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to have to start taking risks with newer like characters coming in. And then I guess it's going to be whether or not those characters hit the audience in the same way. And I mean, I guess the mindset is to always be hitting that younger demographic, right? So you can keep selling merch to them and keep getting them to want all of the like the dolls and the fucking whatever bullshit for Christmas every year and stuff.
I guess.
I mean, that would be my thought process. And if they keep doing that, then why the hell wouldn't they just keep carrying on? But it's not going to be the same, is it? It's going to always be well, you'd hope it always is going to be changing.
Yeah, it's definitely an odd one. You know, at one point, do they get to the point where they simply run out of characters? Because if you go down the route, you're not going to keep reviving characters because that just becomes cheap. I think that's maybe the point where we maybe lose the MCU. If it feels like it's starting to rehash itself, maybe.
Yeah. But they've already had 7,000 Spider-Man, so people are still watching.
It's very true. It's an interesting one.
We'll see. We'll still be doing the podcast.
Yeah.
Yes, on my deathbed.
Just grey and old and wrinkly.
Now, we actually saw this film together, didn't we, boys?
We did, yeah.
We mentioned it at the end of our last episode, and it almost didn't happen, but we just about managed it. And yeah, for the first time, we all got to be together to watch one of these silly MCU movies for the first time as a group. It was quite a lovely evening, wasn't it, boys?
It was. It was nice and chilled out. Colin was a lovely host, and 5 out of 5 would recommend.
I really enjoyed it. It was probably one of the best movie watching experiences I've had in a long, long time having you guys over.
Wow.
So thank you. Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
That takeaway was
Yeah, I
amazing
enjoyed it
as
a
well.
lot. That was a good takeaway, yeah.
We got a
ready
vegan,
burger.
vegan burgers and chips. It was
good stuff.
Very, very nice. So yeah, we'll plan to do it again in the future. There are, in a couple of months' time, maybe 1 or 2 big films coming up. So maybe we'll have our next get-together then. But I don't think I told you this to you, Colin. On Twitter this week, people have been saying, like, once you finally catch up,
Yeah.
let's all go to the cinema at the same time to watch a new release.
Okay.
And a lot of our followers want to join us as well. And I say, the more the merrier.
Just hire a
Hell
screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm well up for that.
So once you're all caught up, we can actually all go see a film together for the first time, along with some of you guys at home as well. I'd be more than up for that.
The idea of me being caught up is very strange. But then you think about it, even this one we've just watched, right? That came out in...
2016.
I mean, we're catching up.
Yeah.
We're getting there.
They do about 3 a year. So
Yeah,
we are catching up.
that's crazy.
And then we'll be jumping into the TV shows, though, so there's plenty to see. So, without further ado, here we go again. And if you boys could be so kind as to give me the floor as I provide a background to Civil War to both Colin and our listeners. As always, Colin, you know the drill by now. Any questions, fire away. I'm sure between Rob and myself, we will be able to help. Are we ready?
Let's go.
Let's do it, baby.
So far, so good.
Skip the compliments. Let's get on with it.
So, Colin, when we did our episode on Captain America, the Winter Soldier, I mentioned that the two fellas that were brought on to direct were Joe and Anthony Russo, or the Russo brothers. And as the shoot was so seamless, so issue-free, the fact that the film was very well received too definitely helped. They were actually offered a long-term contract with Marvel, so to help them develop new projects and direct some more films too. Marvel immediately offered them Captain America 3, and also said if any Avengers movies were possible in the future, they would also be the first choice too.
Interesting.
Now, all of this was signed and contracted 3 months before The Winter Soldier was released. That's how confident Marvel was, thinking that they had some amazing talent on their hands. The Russo brothers also asked that the writers of Winter Soldier also received similar contracts, as they enjoyed working with them so much too. Marvel immediately agreed, and so two fellas named Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely were also given long-term contracts, and those two guys, alongside the Russo brothers and Kevin Feige, then started to plan and plant seeds for the entirety of Phase 3 and the rest of the Infinity Saga. So, Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, they both arrived at Marvel Studios into their brand spanking new offices and decided to note down and draft up ideas as to what Captain America 3 could look like. They got a fair bit into the process. They knew that at the core of the film had to be the relationship between Steve Rogers and Bucky. Then suddenly they heard a little knock on their office door and turned to see Kevin Feige standing in the doorway, the head of Marvel Studios, just standing there looking at them. He said 2 words, Civil War, and then walked off. Now, Civil War is a very, very famous comic book arc that saw the Avengers take 2 sides and fight each other. And so they listened to the big boss, and they took inspiration from the Civil War arc, but then still managed to keep their core theme of Bucky and Steve. Now, in their first draft, it did feature Tony Stark in a very small role. They kind of worked out that it looked like they'd need Robert Downey Jr. on set for about 3 weeks, and then he'd be wrapped.
Can I stop you there, George?
Yes, you can.
Because...
Yes.
Audio commentary facts. So the audio commentary was a delight. It was both...
Who was on it?
It was both of the Russo brothers and previously mentioned Marcus and McFeely. So it was technical, it was funny, it was just charming through and through. But they originally said that a comic book run known as the Mad Bomb was one of the original threads they were going to go with before Kevin Feige did his whole Civil War mic drop. And the original idea was that they had someone try to draw Bucky out of hiding, much like they kind of had here. But the idea was that they were going to blow up this area, blame Bucky, and the whole thing was leading towards someone who wanted to rob the stock exchange, and that Bucky had the answers in order to do that, and they were like, yeah, it just didn't work. So when he came in, it was like, Civil War, baby.
The Mad Bomb as well was also a bomb that almost zombified people that came into contact with him. And I know that was planned. If they were to do it, that would be the final fight scene. It would be released in like a city centre, and it would be Cap and Bucky fighting a bunch of essentially zombified people in a city centre. So much what Colin doesn't really enjoy anymore, the hordes. So it's good that they went another route. Many thanks to Kevin Feige as well.
Apologies for interrupting.
No, please, I love it.
Never apologise for the trumpets, mate.
Exactly, never apologise. So Robert Downey Jr. at this point had actually played Tony Stark 6 times. That's if you include his small little role in the Incredible Hulk credit scene. He read the script and he loved it and actually requested that his part be expanded. Now, if agreed and if it benefited the story, he'd be open to a much larger role, but a much larger payday too. So our good old friend at Marvel, the CEO of Marvel Entertainment, Ike Perlmutter.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, he got wind of this And when he found out that Robert Downey Jr. was asking for more money, he immediately contacted Marcus and McFeely, the two writers, and told them to immediately remove Iron Man from the script.
I thought he was already gone.
No, he did pop, but he was hanging around for a little bit more. A tiny bit more.
Fuck that guy.
Yeah, spoilers. I haven't got this in my notes, but I do know this from memory, that Kevin Feige actually went to the head of Disney at the time and was like, you got to get rid of him. You get rid of my boss. And they did. And then that job was given to Kevin Feige. So, yeah, he unfortunately hung around a little bit longer. So, yeah, like I said, it was yet again poor old Kevin Feige who had to intervene and try and resolve this problem. Feige, he knew just how important it was for Tony Stark to be in this film, because in their minds, the Avengers essentially had to break up at the end of this film. The Avengers should cease to exist, because that would only then heighten the drama and the stakes if a certain large, very angry, very purple alien was to visit Earth in the future. So Civil War needed to set up those stakes. And so then Feige became the middleman in discussions between Perlmutter and RDJ's team. Eventually, obviously, a deal was made, and it saw Robert Downey Jr. earning $40 million, plus his usual percentage of box office if the film made profit, as if that was ever going to be a problem. So in October 2014, Marvel announced that they were officially working on Civil War. But not only that, it would be directed by the Russo brothers. But not only that, the Russo brothers were going to direct an Avengers movie in the future. And not only that, but Civil War would introduce the Black Panther to the MCU. Geek minds all over the world then spontaneously combusted. Now, Chadwick Boseman was something actually of a newcomer to the world of film. He'd done a couple of things before, and Marvel was so impressed by his previous work, he was immediately offered the role on the spot. He actually didn't have to audition. And then suddenly, over the next couple of months, it felt like there was always announcements regarding Civil War. They were constantly announcing new members of the cast returning, like Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda Maximoff, Paul Rudd as Ant-Man, Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow, Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye, Don Cheadle as War Machine. They also said they would be introducing the wonderful Daniel Bruhl as Zemo, who has appeared in previous comics as a villain too. They also very nearly announced that Evangeline Lilly from Ant-Man would be appearing as the Wasp. But then her character was dropped from the script, and that announcement was scrapped. They did this because they knew that they needed to introduce another female superhero, as there wasn't too many in the MCU at the moment. And they felt like seeing her as the Wasp and in costume for the first time was a big moment, and it might actually be overshadowed by the other 104 other things that happen in Civil War. So they didn't want to rob both the character and Evangeline Lilly of that moment. So she was promised a big, fat old next time baby, and they told her to sit tight and, you'll get that moment somewhere down the line. So whilst writing for Civil War was also under the way, Sony released a film called, as Rob, I think, you bought number one, Amazing Spider-Man 2, with Andrew Garfield in the role of Peter Parker. It was, unfortunately, what they would call a disappointing release. Critics didn't love it. It didn't exactly set the box office alight. And so then Kevin Feige had a light bulb moment. And he sent an email to the head of Sony, Amy Pascal. The email pretty much said, if you essentially let us borrow Spider-Man for our next movie, we will help you produce and make a Spider-Man movie over at Sony. So give us Spider-Man for Civil War and we will make you another Spider-Man movie that you finance, but we'll handle all the creative decisions and we'll split the box office. Cheekily, Marvel did say that box office split should be 50-50. Sony declined, mainly because they'd also just started production on a film called Sinister Six, a film about Spider-Man's most famous villains all in a film together. And they actually hired the extremely talented and amazing Drew Goddard to write and direct that film. Now, this is where it all gets a bit weird. Can you both remember that very, very odd time when Seth Rogen almost caused World War III?
Yeah, with the what was the film called?
The Interview.
The Interview, yeah.
Where he plays someone that gets sent to North Korea to interview Kim Jong-un, but then is instructed by, I think, the CIA to assassinate him.
Yeah.
And then the insane fallout caused by that film. Well, one thing that Korea did was actually hack Sony's offices.
I remember this, yeah.
And Amy Pascal's office, and they leaked every single email that Sony had ever received or sent, including Amy Pascal herself. Then suddenly, out in public view was an email from Kevin Feige to Amy Pascal laying out all of his plans for Spider-Man to help Sony with their own Spider-Man film. And in the process, also out in the open, was Amy Pascal's big fat no. Fans erupted. They gave Sony a really hard time over that. They were frothing at the mouth because they saw just how close we were to seeing Spider-Man in the MCU. So then Sony pretty much had no choice. They had to agree. They had their backs against the wall, really. And so then, straight a couple of weeks after, it was announced that Spider-Man would be joining the MCU and appearing in Civil War. But Sony kind of really lucked out with this deal because essentially Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios would help them reboot Spider-Man, and Marvel would actually, in their new deal, only receive 5% of that box office. Kevin Feige, he just loved Spider-Man and Peter Parker as a character. And yes, they'd only be receiving that small amount of box office for the planned solo film as well. But then it did keep the door open for Peter Parker to potentially be involved in any future MCU movies as well. So it's keep your friends close, but your enemies closer.
That was one of Feige's first jobs, wasn't it? Was working, I think, the original X-Men and the original Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, one of his first sort of production roles.
So yeah, the character
Very
means a lot to him. Yeah. And so Civil War started filming in April 2015. And by the beginning of June 2015, so 2 or 3 months into filming, they actually still hadn't cast Spider-Man. This was all done so last minute that they had to cast Peter Parker whilst shooting the film. So Marvel came down to 2 actors, Tom Holland and Asa Butterfield, who people probably best know from Sex Education on Netflix. Now, as Robert Downey Jr. and Chris Evans were basically on set every single day, Marvel brought both the young actors to the set into a back room and let them do their auditions and screen tests individually with both RDJ and Chris Evans as well. And on June 23rd, Marvel offered Tom Holland the role of Spider-Man. 5 days later, he was on set in Atlanta, Georgia, getting ready to film the airport action sequence. 5 days later. So then the shoot, again, thanks to the Russos, was seamless and issue-free. An early cut of the film did make its way to Disney executives who, after watching it, did send an email to Feige and the Russos essentially asking, correct us if we're wrong, but did they just lose at the end of this film? Yeah, change that ending, please. There needs to be a bad guy at the end who they fight after putting aside their differences. The Russos held their ground. They said the last fight scene had to be between Bucky, Steve Rogers, and Tony Stark. This was their ending. Zemo's plan was to crumble the Avengers from within, and by the time the credits rolled, that should still be the case. And after a couple of back and forths, they actually won, and that's how we got to our ending. And it would seem that they did the right thing by holding their ground because both critics and audiences fell hard for this film. It received the 3rd largest opening for an MCU movie. The only 2 films to beat it previously were The Avengers and Avengers Age of Ultron. It made $1.1 billion at the box office worldwide and was the number 1 highest grossing film worldwide of 2016. With fans now knowing that both this writing and directing team not only had more movies in the pipeline for the MCU, but they were also going to be producing an Avengers movie, the future was looking very, very bright for the MCU. Which brings us to the big question. Colin, what did you think?
Well, let's put it this way. this team that they've got going on of the writers and directors, I'm on board with these guys.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to the next installment with these guys involved for sure. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, again, like, I really enjoyed having you guys over and watching it together. That added like a whole new layer to it. And I've known you for a lot of years, George. I don't even know how many by this point. But some of the noises that you made while we were watching this together, I've never heard before from you.
I'm so
and
sorry.
it was great. No, it was great. I loved it. It's like the passion that you have for these, and Rob as well. But obviously, I don't know Rob as well, so I don't, and I haven't known him for as long. But yeah, no, it was a. This film has kind of pulled me back in a little bit because I did feel like I was starting to get to the point where I was like, man, these films just aren't for me, and.
You was thinking, like, if Rob and George die, I'm not watching any more of these.
Exactly. And then I was trying to think of ways to kill you both so I didn't have to watch anymore. But no, this one was fun. It was big, and there was a lot going on.
So much.
My God. Yeah, there was there was a lot thrown at the the audience.
I have a feeling we'll even get to the end of this. We'll stop recording and I'll at least 2 or 3 times go, I didn't mention this.
Yeah.
It's just going to happen. Okay, so Rob, what about you? How was this rewatch for you?
This was a lovely rewatch because with the company, I know we're going to keep going on about it as if we're the best cinema, like the best film watching group to sit down and watch a film with. But it was delightful. Colin's got a lovely dog as well called Fader. Got to meet
she's
Fader.
girl.
Yeah, there's a few bits, we're touching it later, but there's a few moments of this film that hit me harder now that I'm a dad, which I was quite surprised at. But yeah, it's great.
Good. Yeah, this is top 5 MCU for me, potentially top 3. I rate it so highly because, and you know what, I would have been so devastated if you didn't like this, Colin. But I knew that we kind of needed to see this film together, as I feel like it's a massive turning point for the MCU. It's a miracle this film works. We have scenes where there's men the size of buildings are fighting a robot with a yellow stone for a forehead. But then some scenes are the most grounded and mature the MCU has ever been. On the other side of, on the other side of the spectrum as well, we've got these scenes involving round table discussions about security councils in the United Nations. But those scenes are just as riveting as the action scenes as well. 99.9% of this film works for me. There's one tiny aspect that can go fuck itself, but we'll get to that eventually. So, shall we do our deep dive? Because I told you it was going to be a long one today.
Yeah, let's
get going.
Let's get going. So, 1991, the brainwashed super soldier James Bucky Barnes is dispatched from a Hydra base in Siberia to intercept an automobile carrying a case of super soldier serum. So now we have our second cold open to a Marvel movie so far, so no credits, no titles. We jump straight into watching Bucky, or the Winter Soldier, being instructed on a mission and to just brutally take out this car and its occupants before removing these serums from the boot of the car.
He's 100% Fucky Barnes in that scene.
He's Bucky Barnes in that scene. My God. Now, this scene is only a couple of minutes long, and I remember looking over to you, Colin, and you immediately sat up, looked at me and said something along the lines of, shit, already this feels different. I mean, it's a brutal opening, right?
Yeah, I think, I don't want to overuse the word brutal too much, but it's like, and I think I might have touched on this with the Winter Soldier episode that we did, and it's got to be down to this team that are doing it, the Russo brothers and the writers, because I think I said on that episode, I mentioned how that was the first time it felt like I was watching a movie that was made for adults.
Yeah.
At that point, a lot of the other ones you can tell are family friendly, very, and that's kind of a lot of why I didn't really get too into those ones. But yeah, I mean, everything about this one, like the fight scenes and everything, it just felt like if there was a dial of brutality, it had just been like, it had been, turned up a few notches.
Yeah.
And that's what made me sit up. I was like, oh, okay, we're back, are we? We're back in my world for a bit.
Good. But Rob, it's so clever as well. I love these writers as well, because it's also a very clever setup for later on in the film, isn't it?
It's doing two things. It's misdirecting you to what that third act's going to be with the 5 vials of super soldier serum.
Yeah.
And it's also planting those seeds that the car crash and the death of Tony's parents is going to be a major... Like, or that crash. You don't know it's Tony's parents at that point, but that crash is going to be important in some way, whether it be because of the super soldier serum or not. And it hits you so hard, like a car crashed into a tree, because they want you to remember that for later. Like, and there's no way you're going to forget it.
No chance whatsoever. It's fantastic. So, in the present day, approximately 1 year after Ultron is defeated by the Avengers in the nation of Sokovia, Steve Rogers, Natasha Romanoff, Sam Wilson, and Wanda Maximoff stop Brock Rumlow from stealing a biological weapon from a lab in Lagos. Rumlow blows himself up, attempting to kill Rogers. Maximoff telekinetically diverts the explosion, but accidentally destroying a nearby building and killing several Wakandan humanitarian workers in the process. Now, I can't remember if we've ever discussed this before. I think it may have came up in our Age of Ultron episode, especially in regards to like the Hulk versus Iron Man fight and, of course, the Battle of Sokovia. But there must be so many injured or dead civilians during these battles that I think I remember us saying that surely it needs to be addressed sooner or later. Well, here we are. I think this opening sequence has it all, from a gorgeous practical stunts, some really great choreographed fight scenes, a couple of laughs as well, all before ending with that gut punch of the tragedy involving collateral damage. Did this other opening scene, this second opening scene, essentially work for you, Colin, or was it a case of, I've seen this all before?
No, I think this one was good. I liked that it was straight in with the action. I thought the moment where Wanda, grabs whatever's about to happen and throws it up was a really nice visual element. And I think I mentioned it after watching the first Avengers. I think I said, like, surely they're fucking everything up here. Like, there's so much collateral damage. And you even said then, like, oh, well, maybe this might come,
next time, baby.
It was nice to get that, like, essentially what maybe someone who isn't a massive fanboy would have as a criticism to the earlier films.
Yeah.
It was nice that they've kind of lent into that and been like, we get it. There is collateral damage here, and just it is going to come back and turn into something else. So it was nice to see.
Yeah, 'cause you said, I think, at the end of Age of Ultron, I think George asked you what you thought of that team and that lineup. So I'm interested, that opening action sequence, did they work as a team?
Yeah, I think so. And it's strange. Like, I'm sure we'll get onto it as the film goes on. Like, there's so many characters in this now, and it's almost like I got through a lot of this film, and I forgot about Thor, and I forgot about, you know what I mean? Like, there's just other characters where you're like, hold on a sec, there's some big names that aren't even in this one.
Yep.
So I guess that kind of answers the question that these newer guys are definitely cementing their place, I'm still not a big fan of... I think Falcon's a bit of a punch bag in this.
He is.
Like, he just, and he's... and some of the suits are a little... If you were to put, like, a, level of who's got the best suit, there's a few of these that are a bit ropey in this one. But
Okay.
They're not too bad.
Interesting.
Who would you say? It's got the ropey ones, I want to know.
I mean, I'm not that big a fan of Ant-Man's suit, if I'm honest with you.
Okay.
They changed it in this one. It's slightly different.
Maybe that's why then. Yeah. And yeah, Hawkeye looks a bit goofy in places. And
He's in dire need of an upgrade.
Yeah. And Falcon's not the greatest. And I think Winter Soldier for me was way cooler when he had the mask on.
Yes.
Like, having the mask on, he looks a bit like fucking My Chemical Romance running around a bit,
Yeah, brilliant. Rob, any particular action beats or character moments you particularly like in this opening sequence?
There's a really, really cool shot of Rumlow's like firing these grenade launchers at... He's not firing grenade launchers, he's firing grenades from a grenade launcher at Cap. And he gets blasted out of a window and hits 3 different ledges on the way down. Because it's shot in a bird's eye view, you see each different, like, it all, like, looks like one stunt.
Yeah.
It doesn't look
It's beautiful.
digital. So I kind of think that maybe that probably was a stuntman. It looks great. Like, the action's shot so well. I love the Black Widow fight when she sort of crashes a bike into someone and then just keeps going. And they've all got such unique sort of fight styles. So I think it works really well.
Yeah.
Big fan of Black Widow's fighting style.
It's just so brutal, and she uses every limb she's got just in her fight scenes. It's so good. And I love that they bring back, Frank Grillo as Rumlow or as Crossbones now.
As Bad Face Man.
Yeah. It just helps that this wonderful continuity the MCU has got. It tells us that any character can come back, no matter how big or small. It's also a great character beat that Steve Rogers is always going to notice if a bomb is strapped to someone, but he distracts him by mentioning Bucky. I love that. And it kind of reminds me that we're reaching this point of the MCU now where you do kind of need to be in the know as to what's happened in previous films, or if you're not caught up, then kind of good luck keeping up. But it's clearly worked because fans and critics still fell for the film. But are you finding that at any point, Colin, that, is the continuity confusing at you at any point? Are you just about keeping up?
I would say I'm closer to just about keeping up than being like fully in. I'm glad that you two were sat there, because there was a couple of moments in the film where I was like, have we met this guy already? And you're like, no, we haven't. Because there is a lot that they throw at you in this one. And again, like, some of the biggest moments of this film for me, when you guys told me that they were in the trailer, I was almost gutted for anyone that saw this film that had seen the trailer, because they were probably the biggest moments for me. And again, because I don't have that build-up of, like, there's clearly a community, and, like, you two must get together, or when you're just chatting, you must be talking about what's coming up in the new ones and stuff like that. Like, I miss out on all of that. So some things do sort of... that some things might not stick as much as others. So that is, like... I don't really have that many negatives about this film, but one of the biggest ones, if I was to have any, is the fact that you really need to have watched the other ones to watch this film. Like, you couldn't sit someone down and go, I'm going to show you this cracking film, and they've never heard of the MCU. Like, if this was the first film I'd watched, I would have got 10 minutes into it and been like, I haven't got a fucking clue what any of this is.
I would say that's the same with any third film in a series. Like, you can look at it like it's a part of the MCU, or it's the third Captain America film.
Yeah.
I see what you mean. Yeah, maybe there is some bits that sort of require the other the Marvel films to understand.
I think I'm going to defend it here. I think making it a negative point is you being grumpy, because imagine sitting down and saying to someone, "Here's Lord of the Rings: Return of the King." There you go, and then being like, "Well, it's rubbish. Why is it rubbish? I ain't seen the first two." Well, it's not rubbish then, is it? You just haven't seen the first two.
I guess so, but I don't know if... Do you think you could have just got away with showing someone Captain America 1 and 2 and then gone into this one? I think a lot of the others...
Okay, I agree with you there, because then suddenly when Hawkeye turns up, you're going to be like, who's this? When Vision is walking around, you're going to be like, who's this? When they introduce Ant-Man, okay, yeah, I can kind of see that. But, all of these previous events, and like I said, the continuity is part of the reason why I love the MCU. These shared universes would be so easy to get wrong, DC, and really fuck it up, because they somehow play around with all of these genres and with all of these different characters, but it all still feels like the same universe, and it has never been done on this scale before. So as a film fan and as a bit of a superhero nerd, I think it's just so exciting to see. So yeah, moving on. General Ross, the US Secretary of State, informs the Avengers that the United Nations is preparing to pass the Sokovia Accords, which will establish a UN panel to oversee and control the team. The Avengers are divided. Tony Stark supports oversight because of his role in Ultron's creation and Sokovia's destruction, whilst Rogers has more faith in his own judgment than that of politicians. And here, for me, we have one of Civil War's most riveting aspects, the argument for and against the Sokovia Accords. So, a group made up of most of the world's countries who decide where and when it is appropriate for the Avengers to essentially go in and do their thing. Because otherwise they're just going to be seen as vigilantes entering countries of their choice and completing missions of their own accord. Colin, who's right and who's wrong? And are the Accords a good thing or are they a bad thing? There's not a right or wrong, I think.
No, well, I think that's the answer, isn't it? It's like, at that point, you can see both sides, but then I'm pretty sure it pops back to Black Widow's... What is her name when she's not Black Widow? I need to stop
Natasha
calling her that.
Romanoff.
Okay, when it goes to her, and I think she sort of implies that the best route is to sign it, but then we'll be under them, but then with being under them, we can do our own thing and we can maybe try.
How does she word it? At least we've got a hand on the wheel.
Well, yeah, because to me, like, going down the Cap route is... It's like, well, then you're a bunch of wanted criminals if you try and do anything, and then you're almost on the run, aren't you? Whereas if you're under it, it's almost like what you said earlier, keep your enemies closer. It's like,
yeah.
But obviously signing it then opens up its own issues of what are they then going to allow us to do and not do. So, yeah, I mean, there isn't a right or wrong, but it's a very interesting topic for a film.
100%. So, yeah, Rob, for me, what makes this so clever is that both Starks and Steve Rogers' ideas or feelings surrounding the Accords are so well defined too. It's just fantastic, incredibly strong writing.
Yeah, I agree. There's what I found interesting watching it this time is that I kind of thought, well, I always used to think that maybe Iron Man's side makes more sense. But then you kind of think, well, if Cap had signed, if everyone had signed, Bucky would be dead. And for a crime he didn't commit. Now, is that right?
Well,
yeah, exactly. That's what I find really interesting. And what I learned today, listening to the audio commentary first.
Oh my God, that's scary.
That's a deep one.
Oh my God, that's scary.
Was that they did, obviously, with films, a lot of films have test screenings to see how audience are reacting to certain things, and there are certain questions to see, things that could potentially be problems or not work or not be clear enough, and that will inform reshoots and stuff. So in this film, the moment the Russo brothers realised that they were done was when they showed it to a test screening and they asked who was right. They said, is Cap right? And 15 people out of 30 raised their hands. Is Iron Man right? The other 15 raised their hand. They said,
that's
right,
so good.
lock it in.
Yeah, lock it in, boys. Picture lock. Love that so much.
I mean, they should have said, should Cap kiss anyone?
And then 30 people all put their hands up and say, no, we'll get to it.
And then lock it in.
So Stark, at the beginning of this film, he's an absolute mess, isn't he? So he's spending millions on programs basically for his own therapy, creating different programs to essentially spend time with his parents again. Pepper, it looks like she's left him. And, I adore the beat shortly after this when he's waiting at the lift and that other woman is standing there. And as she reaches into the purse to grab just a photo of her son, he basically launches himself on her and grabs her arm, thinking that she's a threat. I've said it in almost every film, but Tony Stark is this poor guy. He's such a mess. I love Robert Downey Jr. in this. I'm sure we'll get into more of him later, but I think this is his best performance, and it's not even an Iron Man movie.
The de-aged flashback, I think we all chatted about this a little bit. How did you feel about it, Colin?
Well, yeah, I mean, initially I thought they were doing some crazy CGI and trying to show us like a younger version of Tony Stark, and I was a bit like, what is going on here? Like, it was very off-putting. It kind of took me down that uncanny valley that we've mentioned in the past. But then when it revealed that it was just him creating that environment for himself, I really liked it. And I've got to agree with you, George. I think this is Robert Downey Jr.'s best performance as Iron Man. I mean, I've had a bit of an up and down relationship with Iron Man over these films.
I don't remember any down moments.
No, I can't remember.
At least this one wasn't set at Christmas.
Oh,
but
fuck.
Nah, I actually think he was probably one of the highlights of this film for me was his character and the way they've taken him, and you could just feel you could just see the damage that he's gone through up until this point. I love some of the scenes where he's not even in it as a part, but he's just like in the background, and just the way he's like slumped on the couch or just like sat back in the background. It's like, yeah, he's not in a good place.
Absolutely
not in a good place at all.
There's that one beautiful line reading of him as well when he's explaining to the Avengers who that woman's son was. And he's like, yeah, he wanted to go out and see the world. He could have gone to Vegas. He could have gone to Amsterdam. That sounds fun. That's what I would have done. He decided to do charity work in Sokovia. He mentions the guy's name, and he said, you wouldn't know his name because we too busy dropped a building on him as we were kicking ass. And it's just he's amazing in this. And considering it's also not a Tony Stark movie, Chris Evans as Steve Rogers only has 5 minutes more screen time than Robert Downey Jr. in this film.
I love how like emotionally raw and alone he is in this. So they take away Pepper. He's clearly working through the death of his parents, like you said. And like, imagine being the scientist or like the tech that he gets involved to sort of help him make that project of, well, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to make some hologram to deal with my grief, and it clearly still isn't enough to deal with it. He's not over it. It's just a great way to start it, and I love Alfre Woodard's her performance by the lift and that whole sequence. And when I was saying about how there are bits that hit me harder this time as a dad, that was really worked for me a lot more than it did any other time I've watched it, when she's describing how angry she is at him and how accountable he should be because of her son. I don't know, it just worked a lot more this time than when I've watched it prior to being a dad.
And that AI sequence as well, like what you just mentioned at the beginning, Rob, with our cold open, that it's doing two things at the same time as well. It's showing us the headspace that Tony Stark is in at the time, but it's completely just planting those scenes and reminding us of what his parents looked like. The fact that he never got to say goodbye to them, they died suddenly. It's all planting those seeds for all of the finale, and it's doing it so we don't watch it and go, oh, that's coming back later. We're never going to think that. It's this fucking film. Right, so let's move on. Helmut Zemo tracks down and kills Barnes' old Hydra handler, stealing a book containing the trigger words to activate Barnes' brainwashing. So I know I say it's early on. We are pushing, and there's still lots more to discuss. But I think we should just get into it now. Colin, it's safe to say that Zemo is the most unconventional villain we've had so far in the MCU. So does he work as a villain? And we ask most films now. Whereabouts does he rank in terms of our villains as well?
Well, this was actually the point where I think I turned to both of you and said, have we met this guy before? Because, and to me, that's always a very good indication of like how he comes across. Because if I feel like he's already been in this world and I may have already come across him by now, that can only really be a good thing from my point of view.
Yeah.
I think I like the fact that he was, a very human villain.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he had, and he had very, very good reasonings for being a villain, which is always another good thing.
Yeah.
I do think, though, that unfortunately there wasn't enough of him in this film. Like, I think that it was slightly overshadowed by everything else that was going on. I would have liked to have seen a lot more of him doing a lot of the things that clearly he was doing in the background to get to that point at the end.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a shame. I mean, that villain had the potential of being up there with a Loki, or maybe even knocking Loki off the top spot for me, because I really did like him when he was on. He was a scene stealer for sure. But I just think, unfortunately, didn't have enough of him in the film for me.
Yeah. So I'll ask you another question we always ask you. Are we seeing him again, or does he feel like
I
a
hope
one
we
and
see
done?
him again. I mean, like you said earlier, we had a guy come back at the beginning of this one that had a fucking building land on top of his head, and so it's like there's no ruling anyone out anymore. I really hope so.
So what about you, Rob? Does Zemo work in this version, in our version of the MCU?
I really like Daniel Bruhl anyway. I think You ever seen a film called Goodbye Lenin or Good Night Lenin? Can't remember what. I think it's Good Night.
Don't think so.
It's a German film, but it's basically about this guy that Daniel Bruhl plays, and his mum goes into a coma, and she wakes up after the Berlin Wall has been pulled down, and they're told that if she has any kind of traumatic experience, she could go back into said coma, or it could cause heart attacks or whatever. And so they have to pretend that she's still living under communist rule, and the wall is still up. It's really, really good. Anyway, yeah, Daniel Bruhl is incredible, which leads me to two in a row. Audio commentary facts.
I thought we were going to get two trumpets.
No, it's too late for that. So Zemo's introduction, this whole thing where he crashes into the guy's car, and he's an undercover reformed Hydra agent or whatever. He's not reformed, but he's hiding in Cleveland or whatever. That introduction was reshot because it was originally an auction scene where he was at a black market auction and he was buying the book, which they found a whole lot less interesting and was right to redo, I think.
Yeah, I think so too.
It is a whole lot less interesting. And we also missed that very horrendous drowning.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Let's talk about brutal. Not a kid's film, is it?
No.
There's another amazing fact that so Zemo's wife, which we'll get to later on the voicemail, was voiced by Anthony Russo's wife. And as Joe Russo played one of the dead psychiatrist that
in the bathtub.
Yeah, in the bathtub. Daniel Bruhl walked up to Anthony Russo on set and quietly whispered to him, "So, I have murdered your brother and married your wife."
Legend. I think the first time I saw him was Rush by Ron
film.
Howard. Great film, and he's
Bastards
extremely good in it as well. Oh my God, he's so good in Inglourious Bastards. I love Daniel Bruhl. So Colin, like I said earlier on, Zemo was actually a villain in the comics too. So when we kind of are first introduced to him, he's 13th in a long line of Baron Zemos. His family have got this lineage that goes all the way back to like 1480 with a guy called Harbin Zemo. Most of the Zemos were villains. The 12th Zemo went by the name of Heinrich Zemo, and he was one of the top scientists for the Nazis and also Hydra. He fought Captain America in the comics. But this one in Civil War, in the film Civil War, Helmut Zemo, that character... He was also in the comics one of Captain America's biggest villains. He formed a group of villains called the Masters of Evil. He also formed another group called the Thunderbolts. He was quite a big villain. He also used to wear this big purple/pinkish mask over his face. Very, very
So
different,
potentially a next time baby then, if he's got that kind of... Or at least
if he's got
maybe
all that...
a fellow Zemo may pop up.
Potentially. But obviously in this adaptation, he's just a guy from Sokovia who lost his family during one of the Avengers battles. I think it's such a clever adaptation of the character. At a UN conference in Vienna, where the Accords are being ratified, a bomb kills King T'Chaka of Wakanda. Security footage indicates the bomber is Bucky Barnes, whom T'Chaka's son, T'Challa, vows to kill. So let's just jump straight back in with another character. It's all good if you skip a few things as well when we're discussing this. Firstly, Colin, were you surprised to see Black Panther in this film? And secondly, how was he for you? Are you excited to see more?
Yes. A big fat yes from me.
Ooh.
I know obviously when you first see him, you don't realise at that point he's Black Panther because he's not suited and booted, but I did recognise him because... I know I'm a bit of a fucking Marvel hermit, but I've seen his face because obviously, what happened with him after these films and stuff. So I recognised his face. But my God, man, talk about a scene stealer. Jesus Christ. The guy was practically glowing in most of these scenes. I don't know what I don't know. Yeah. I don't have the words to talk about acting and stuff the way you guys do, but there's something that I can't put into words when there's just certain actors on screen. They have a presence about them.
Charisma, motherfucker.
Yeah, charisma. Yeah.
He's so magnetic. I'm surprised Tony Stark wasn't sticking to him all the time.
It makes me very happy to hear that reaction, Colin. And please, Rob, tell me that you agree when, I think we both say here that Chadwick Boseman is exceptional as T'Challa.
Yeah. I mean, from the minute everything Colin said, as soon as he's on screen and he's got that scene, that lovely moment with, he has a few good moments with Natasha Romanoff as well. But his first scene, in which I think Colin coined a new phrase that he said, "She's a smokehouse, isn't she?"
Nice. Smoke show.
Smoke show.
Smoke show.
Smoke show. And I refuse to believe that.
I had to Google it for you, and it was in the Urban Dictionary, I think. Smoke show. Yeah. There was a couple of smoke shows in this. Yeah, for sure.
We all included T'Challa. We all.
Yeah. Oh hell yeah, man. He is the smoke house.
When he turns to his dad and he speaks in Wakandan, we all joked that that's what he was saying. Like, she's a smoke show.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, he's so good. He's just got this presence about him.
Yep. His whole speech at the end of the film, talking about, how vengeance has consumed pretty much everyone in the film, and he's done letting it consume him, is incredible.
He's got an arc. They managed to give him an arc
They give him an arc where he's got like 3 or 4 scenes. And Colin, this dude is American, and his accent is incredible. And you've kind of hinted at it, and I'm sure we'll get to it later. Because as everyone knows, Chadwick Boseman has now unfortunately passed away. I got goosebumps just saying it. At the unspeakably too young age, 43, of cancer. He was diagnosed just after Civil War was released, and yes, he filmed the Black Panther solo movie with cancer, and did not tell a single member of the cast or even the director, as he didn't want special treatment or to burden anyone. Such a tragedy, and trust me, Colin, it hurts so much more, because just wait till you see how good he is in Black Panther as well. It's
definitely the one on the top of my list of ones I would like to watch, so hopefully it comes up soon.
Yes. It's very good. Informed by Sharon Carter of Barnes's whereabouts and the authorities' intention to kill him, Rogers decides to try to bring in Barnes, his childhood friend and obviously war comrade himself. Rogers and Wilson track Barnes to Bucharest and attempt to protect him from T'Challa and the authorities. But all 4, including T'Challa, are apprehended by the Bucharest police and James Rhodes, War Machine. So, I mean, I guess we haven't even mentioned the passing of Peggy Carter. It's such a big moment, just given to us so early in the beginning of the film, and we kind of move on to it fairly quickly. Rob, was it time to let Peggy go, as sad as it is?
I think it's a good scene. I think the sort of lead into that scene feels a bit... He just gets a text saying she's gone, and he's like, right, see ya. Off to a church now. It just feels really weird. He's like mid-conversation, he gets a text, and he just says she's gone. And he's like, right, all right, see you later. And the next minute you're in the funeral scene's great, but it's almost like they didn't know how to put it into the film. But I love the whole speech about, if every time someone tells you something you know is wrong is right, you root yourself like a tree and say, no, you move. Great.
It strengthens his arc and arguments around the Accords. Yeah,
because he knows that the woman he loved would have been on the same page as him. So, of course, he's going to stick to his guns.
Yeah, for sure. So, Colin, just mentioning like some of the scenes I just talked about then. So, Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier. This is the third time you've seen him now. Obviously, the second time you've seen him as Winter Soldier. Are you starting to get bored of him? Are you finding him more interesting as these films go on? And also, B, I know I'm throwing a lot of questions at you. When we last see the character in this film, he's being put essentially back on ice.
Yeah.
Scared that Hydra may find him again one day. Again, is that it for Bucky? Do we keep him on ice?
To answer the first part, I'm not getting bored of him. I liked what they did with him in this one. and I enjoyed the the plot line of Zemo finding this book and having this, this whatever it was, really like a speech. I mean, what would you even call it?
Mm-hmm.
It's
just essentially a bunch of random words, trigger words to wake him up, essentially.
So I liked having that point of him sort of, at any moment, he could be either the good guy or the bad guy. Because I remember from the Winter Soldier episode, you were sort of saying there, maybe even slightly hinting at what was to come, you were saying, do you want him to be... do you want him to be a villain for longer, or are you happy to see him join the crew and stuff? And at that point, I think I said, happy to see him join the crew, but I would like to see him as a villain for a bit longer. And you kind of got a bit of both in this one, didn't you? So
you definitely did.
That was nice. Do I want to see more of him? He's not on the top of the list, but I'm not going to hate it. Like, I enjoy his character. I like his style. But he does need a bit of a haircut, though. I'll say that much.
Well, who knows? Let's keep this moving on. So, impersonating a psychiatrist sent to interview Barnes, Zemo recites those words to activate Barnes's brainwashing. He questions Barnes and sends him on a rampage to cover his own escape. Rogers stops Barnes and sneaks him away. Let's get into this, because I love this whole next sequence. Mainly because everyone gets to fight without their gear, so to speak. So T'Challa doesn't have the Black Panther outfit. Stark has one gadget essentially attached to his hand. Rogers doesn't have the shield. And it's this really vicious and fast fight culminating in the amazing moment, everyone, of Steve Rogers holding on to a helicopter that poor Bucky is trying his best to fly away from. Now, Colin, at that moment...
I've got something for you.
Oh
ka-ching, ka-ching, Marvel money shot.
Yes! I'm so happy you made a jingle for that. I wasn't expecting a jingle for it, but I love it. Marvel money shots for sure.
And I will do a different sexual groan at the end of each one. That's the Steve Todgers promise.
Brilliant. So speaking of groans, but not of the sexual kind, Colin, you did do a bit of a groan when that moment happened.
Yeah.
Was it too silly for you?
It was way too much. I mean, I think there was a lot of moving Todgers probably at that point in the cinema. But yeah, the fight scene up until that point I thought was really cool, and I loved. Yes. I know I say I'm not a big gadgety guy, but I loved the Iron Man just having the hand, and I think there's that moment where he stops a bullet because he just holds the top of the gun and then rips the gun apart.
It's my favourite beat in the sequence. I'm sure Rob was going to mention it as well. Yeah. It's he literally puts the hand to his face as Bucky. Literally puts the gun to his face and pulls the trigger. And you see that one tiny beat in Robert Downey Jr.'s eyes of, fuck, I almost just died.
He would have shot me in the head.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, that was cool. But man, I mean, I think that was one of the noises that you made at that point that I've never heard before in my life.
Moment.
There's a great bit in the audio commentary where I haven't got it noted, but I just remember they're talking about how it's the characters that really interest them and they love character moments, and then that moment happens and one of the Russos is like, yep, a lot of character in those biceps. Something even they know.
Yeah,
it's a comic booky moment.
Yeah, definitely is. Yeah.
Any other beats or moments you particularly like in that sequence, Rob?
I really like how cat-like Boseman is in that scene. Like, there's a bit where he gets punched back and he sort of almost rolls into like a cat pose. It's really odd.
Yes.
But I love the we kind of had to gloss over it because we've got so much to do, but the action sequence before, when the whole Bucky escaping his apartment,
it's incredible.
We see the Black Panther suit for the first time and all that stuff. That whole sequence is great as well, and there's so much good stunt work. One of the I don't know if you guys have ever watched, and I highly recommend a group on YouTube called Corridor Digital. They did a sequence with one of the stunt guys called Guy De Silva, who he works with. He was Black Panther stunt performer for that film, and he talks about how the suit was like rubber, basically. So any kind of extended leg kicks or movements and jumps was like having to run against a bungee rope in order to do it. So watching it this time, I was like, props to that guy. That must have been
man.
Some of the dynamic poses he gets out of that suit. is impressive.
Yeah.
I've got one more interesting fact, which, burning through now, when we got trivia later, I'm going to go for it. I'm hoping George doesn't do my trivia later. But
my trivia is rubbish this week.
Audio commentary facts. So you may have thought the flat or apartment, if you're American, that Bucky is living in was lit kind of grim and grimily. Is anyone out of you two aware of a song called Turn Down for What by Little John and someone else?
Yeah.
Yes. I know the music video
music video is directed by a director duo called Daniels, who have just directed Everything Everywhere All at Once, which is
one of the films
incredible. And that's what they used as their lighting reference. They gave the cinematographer that music video and said, that's what we want Bucky's flat to look like.
What a coincidence. Out of all the music videos in the world, I watched that one today. I searched it on YouTube and watched that music video.
They mention it in the commentary. It's great.
How strange. It does look like a lot like it. That's awesome. So let's keep going. When Barnes regains his senses, he explains that Zemo is the real Vienna bomber and wanted the location of the Siberian Hydra base where other brainwashed winter soldiers are kept in cryogenic stasis. Unwilling to wait for authorization to apprehend Zemo, Rogers and Wilson go rogue and recruit Wanda Maximoff, Clint Barton, and Scott Lang, Ant-Man, to their cause. With General Ross's permission, Stark assembles a team composed of Romanoff, T'Challa, Rhodes, Vision, and Peter Parker to capture the Renegades. Colin, we only bloody got Spider-Man in this film as well, didn't we?
Yeah.
And they actually cast him young this time. So the reason why we all saw Spider-Man as our last movie and as our first bonus episode is hopefully a little bit more apparent now. And I know it's only brief and we only get him for a couple of scenes, but here we go. I mean, how was Tom Holland as Spider-Man and Peter Parker for you?
Well, this is another crazy thing that I cannot believe they gave away in the trailer.
They sure
Because,
did.
like, I mean, I hadn't even put two and two together about the fact we did the bonus episode on Spider-Man last week. You did well, by the way, hiding that in. Because firstly, it was like, oh, maybe it's going to be Blade, maybe it's going to be X-Men. And then you just... So I was like... So you did well there.
It worked
out very well. I'm pretty sure I turned to you guys at one point and went, he's a baby.
You did?
It's... I mean, and again, I didn't grow up on the comics. I didn't do any of that. So, controversially, Tobey Maguire is my Spider-Man.
Yep.
So it was a little strange seeing such a young kid, essentially, playing that role. And it was even weird seeing, like, Aunt May being a bit of a smoke show in this one as well, you know? Like,
well, as Robert Downey Jr. calls her, as Tony Stark calls her, Hottie May.
Hottie May, is it?
Aunt Hottie, I think he calls her.
Yeah.
Aunt Hottie, that's it.
I did like the scene when Tony Stark was in there, and that was cool. Again, like you said, we didn't see too much of him, so I'm not going to be too judgmental yet on Tom Holland as Spider-Man. It was a bit jarring just seeing how young he was, and I'm sure, like you guys said on the Spider-Man episode, to most fans, it was probably like, finally we're getting the version of Peter Parker that we all know and love from the comics. So, yeah.
We will see. Rob, was Tom Holland the right casting? You know, because as previously explained, it was all done so very last minute. Was he the right casting, or should they have waited a little longer?
I think he's the perfect casting, and in order to back that up, I did Ask Jeeves or Bing or Google. I found it on the internet.
Oh my God.
Oh, so many fucking jingles.
So, going back to good old Corridor Digital, they had the stunt coordinator for Civil War on their show, and he said that in the audition with Tom Holland was auditioning with Chris Evans. As you mentioned earlier, he auditioned with both RDJ and Chris Evans. Tom Holland asked the stunt coordinator, he said, is it all right if I do a front flip into my line delivery with Cap? And he said, well, we're definitely not insured for that. So if that goes wrong, we're screwed. And then under his breath sort of said, well, it is an audition for Spider-Man, and left it at that. So they call action, Tom Holland front flips into the scene with Chris Evans and lands perfectly on his mark. And apparently Feige and everyone else in the audition room's jaws hit the floor, and it was kind of like...
He's
you
in.
know, it was him.
That screen test is on YouTube as well.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, it's very good. And he literally flips into the frame. It's incredible.
I love it. And I think just the writing and all that stuff is really good. Like how they somehow manage to do, with great power comes great responsibility in a way that is really organic. Like, because you know what Peter's gone through up to this point, because we're not seeing the origin. So when he says, and his delivery of it is brilliant, when he says, like, when you can do the things I can do, but then you don't, and then the bad things happen, they happen because of you, you know what that means to him. And it's just, I got goosebumps in the cinema, and I think I get goosebumps every time he delivers that line. I'm just like, it's brilliant.
We know what he's referring to. Yeah, for sure. There's a take, really, that people say that based on his ideas and philosophies, that maybe he should actually be on Captain America's side, and there's a part of Tony Stark that realizes that but still kind of takes him under his wing in the hopes that he'll just follow the cool rich guy. I think it's an interesting angle. I think Spider-Man is an absolute breath of fresh air for the MCU. Even in this small role, it is nuts to see him in the same film as the rest of our MCU heroes. It still today, when we watched it, blows my mind to see Tony Stark and Peter Parker in the same scene together. And I love that, alongside, Paul Rudd. He's got that sort of deer in the headlights here because he's so excited during the airport fight. A sequence that actually could be really dark. They obviously know that, the really intense fight is yet to come. And, this fresh air that he brings to it is really demonstrated as well by Falcon asking him, or just telling him, I don't know if you've ever been in a fight before, but there's usually not this much talking. I love that little line there. And obviously they've got that wonderful, beautiful little moment as well where even though they're fighting, Peter and Steve Rogers still share a little moment just because they're both from New York. Again, it's all this shared continuity and shared universes. I absolutely love it. So, speaking of that sequence, Stark's team intercepts Rogers' group at the Leipzig airport, where they fight until Romanoff allows Rogers and Barnes to escape. As Rogers and Barnes are escaping, Rhodes is inadvertently shot down by Vision and becomes partially paralysed. So, here we go. The massive airport fight sequence. Colin, epic, boring, fun, too much? How's this sequence for you? Because there is a lot going on.
Yeah, I don't know if I think I might get you boys a bit upset with what I'm about to say about this, but
I'm ready.
Brace yourself.
Yeah,
I still haven't already recovered from you saying you wouldn't continue watching the MCU if me and Rob die. So keep going.
I said if you died, I would in memoriam. I said if we just decided to stop the podcast, I wouldn't bother.
Okay. I feel a lot better.
Yay!
I've watched Black Panther for sure. Okay, so this whole bit kind of fell a little bit flat for me actually. I understand that it was the big moment, and I can imagine it again. I go back to it a lot. If you grew up being fans of the comics and being attached to a lot of these characters, I can totally get that seeing these, face-offs between certain characters would have been like very satisfying to watch.
Yep.
For me, and the only way I can really describe this is if I jump into the music world a bit, because it's like if you're making a rock record and you want to have really big sounding guitars, right? You can double track them, which means you record one guitar, you pan it to the left speaker, you record another one doing the same thing, you pan it to the right speaker, and it makes this like wall of sound, big sounding, guitars in a record. And then you can stack those by recording the same parts on top of them, and then it gets bigger and bigger. But it gets to a point after doing that 2 or 3 times that all of the frequencies start to cancel each other out, and it actually starts to sound smaller. And I feel like with this scene, there was so much going on and there were so many big moments that it actually, for me, kind of collapsed in on itself and actually felt quite small.
Okay.
amazing.
Interesting.
And I know that's going to upset you because I'm sure it was a big moment. And even like Ant-Man getting massive, it didn't hit me at all. It was just a bit like that bit just felt ridiculous to me. I don't know. I mean, and again, that's just how I felt about it. I'm sorry, I'm going to piss people off because I'm sure it's like their favourite part of the film, and I can imagine it's a massive moment in the whole fucking MCU, but it just didn't hit for me. It fell very flat.
It's all good. Rob, thoughts? Quick.
In terms of flatness, I would say like having to do a fight scene like this in this film, where the colour grading is very naturalistic and grounded, does make it visually, at times, look very flat and grey. But I do fucking love it. Because it's like...
I was tempted to say, Rob, you go first, mate, because I know you're going to have loads of great things to say about it.
I like that it has like almost 3 acts. You've got the going easy on them, okay, we brought in Vision, we brought in the big guns, and then you've got that after sequence with them getting in the jet up until Rhodey being
Before
turned into a milkshake.
Yeah, it gets real.
So I love that element, and I love all the individual geeky elements of it. I mean, I can't deny when I saw Giant Man in the cinema, there was a Marvel money shot. It was no, I really do love it, and I think there are a few things that are weird about it. Like if you notice that when Tony's talking to after the in the Underoos moment, there's so many great visual effects in this film, but it's like his head is floating independent of the Iron Man suit for the whole of that sequence. It looks like someone's just sort of cut and pasted his head.
There was a lot of that for me with Iron Man.
There's one shot of Black Widow in the airport sequence that is really like obviously green screened. But must have been like a last.
That's because all those backgrounds was all shot on a green screen. All of that sequence. So it does feel a bit flat to me.
I don't want to say that I hated it because I didn't, but then there were moments of it. Like I liked seeing some of the characters doing certain things, but like as a whole, it just didn't really. It wasn't like a bit to me like the final one coming up, which we'll talk about, and that's only had 3 people in it. That was a million times bigger in scale and everything for me. And it kind of goes back to the Spider-Man film we watched last week. Like the final fight scene in that was just 2 dudes, and it felt massive, and I loved it. And I think, it was just this was like an opposite version of what a fight scene can be, and it just didn't really work for me.
I would say there's moments in the fight scene where you realise, like, maybe the stakes aren't as high as the film is making it out to be, because we all know that these guys aren't going to kill each other at the end of the day. They sort of hint at it with when Hawkeye and Black Widow were fighting, and they tell each other that they know they're both pulling their punches, really. But there are so many different other moments that I absolutely love, from the introduction of Spider-Man to
that was cool.
Ant-Man being launched on Hawkeye's arrow. I'm ready, arrow guy, to go into Robert Downey Jr.'s or Tony Stark's suit, to Peter Parker's way of taking down Giant Man. The whole remember that really old movie Empire Strikes Back, and then making every single Avenger feel incredibly
Fun
old.
fact: Tom Holland hasn't actually seen. Sorry, audio commentary fact. Tom Holland hasn't seen Empire Strikes Back, or hadn't at the time they were filming this. So that made them feel incredibly okay with using that line about, have you seen this old movie? I have a few issues actually, and it's only through watching it again. When I was watching it with you guys, I wasn't that fussed, and I do kind of let it go because I enjoy it so much. But in terms of some of it, just doesn't seem to ring true for me in terms of the characters. So I get that Clint, like Hawkeye, wants to break Wanda out because he owes Wanda for Pietro's sacrifice. He sacrificed his life to save, Hawkeye's, and he owes her for that. But I don't know, other than that, what he's doing there. And there's also a weird moment where Wanda swats away Black Widow while him and her are fighting, and he sort of gives her a nod as if to say thank you, but that's like his oldest friend. Why is he like, cheers for twatting my best friend? It feels a bit, because we haven't seen their especially his political reason for wanting to be there, it didn't ring true to me. And also, we've only just seen Ant-Man get his family back, so as much as I love Ant-Man being in it, again, I'm kind of a bit like, why is he there? Why did he agree to do it?
They just shoehorned him in a little bit.
Yeah, because we know Hank Pym's got an issue with Stark,
brushed off a little
but I don't know why Scott Lang's there.
Because they do tell him, don't they? They say, by doing this, you're going to become a wanted criminal. And it's a very brush-off line of like, well, that's nothing new for me.
It is if you don't get to see your daughter anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it feels...
I did think there were a few question marks to me as to why each people are on each side of the team. I mean, you get it for like the main, obviously Tony Stark and Steve Rogers and that, but it did kind of feel like they're just chucking more in just to add more to the kind of circus for the fans to see these characters against each other.
Mm-hmm.
But then I wouldn't want to see the film without them at the same time, which is what I find a difficult thing to wrestle with.
Very interesting. I'd love to know the audience's feedback as well. Was it too much?
You loved it, right?
Of course,
I loved it.
Yeah,
but I can still see those
like
things there.
Like I said, there's a couple of character motivations that may be a bit.
I can imagine most people loved it. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if I'm literally on my own.
The music in the scene is incredible. I can still hear that music in my head. It's stunning. So, Colin, did you miss? You kind of already hinted at it. Did you miss Thor and the Hulk in this movie? Like, should one or both of them have been added? And I'll ask the same question to you, Rob. Is the film lacking because those characters aren't in the film?
I wouldn't say it was lacking, but it kind of gave me a bit of a panic attack when I realised that there is an entire other, world happening as this is going on with what we've already seen in Thor's universe, and because this film just felt so. It was such a grand, version of all of these characters. There were parts where you had forgotten about them completely, but then when you were thinking to yourself, hold on a sec, there are other big characters here that we haven't seen. If they had popped up, man, I would have been like, oh, this is way too much now. Right. I don't think we would have, because again, we wouldn't, like, what reason would Thor have to join a side at this point? Like, he's off doing his own thing, right? And Hulk,
he's like, but one of the. He's from Asgard.
Exactly.
Goes to all these different planets. He's not going to. I don't think he's going to give a toss about the Accords.
But it does. Like I said, fill me with a bit of like, holy shit! Like we've got a lot more that's going to be going on. And
I think the film's going ultimately for a grounded tone, and they kind of bring in Ant-Man and Spider-Man to sort of bring a bit of levity, so it's not just this complete dour. Trudge, which I think it might have been if you'd not had that moment to laugh at, in that scene. And I think, again, Thor has no motivation to be there. The Hulk side of Banner has no interest, and Banner wouldn't want to be involved anyway, even if he wasn't AWOL. And it also makes it a bit too easy, I think. The same with Nick Fury. If Nick Fury was able to just swoop in and go, right, you guys, break it up,
sort it out.
Yeah, it just like it's almost better that it's sort of they have to fight amongst themselves. The parents are and the big boys are away.
Yeah, leave the kids to fight.
Also, how much of a wet fart is Vision?
Still not a fan of Vision?
Nah, man.
Okay.
Well, not even when he's making paprikash.
Oh, no, he doesn't do it for me.
Poor old Vision.
I wonder if he'll grow on you.
Let's keep.
Maybe.
If he's even back.
Oh.
We shall see. There's lots of cool moments in that fight sequence, though, isn't there? Like I
like the Iron Man stuff when he goes into Iron Man suit. That was kind of that was one of the.
This is your conscience speaking. We don't talk much.
Yeah, that was cool.
I love him before he even joins the fight sequence when they get him out of the boot of the van, and he's just like Captain America.
Yeah,
and just. I'm shaking your hand too long. And it kind of turns round. And what does he look at? He looks at Wanda or Hawkeye. No, he looks at Wanda, doesn't he? I know you too. You're great.
Yeah.
Thanks for thanking of me. Every line is
She,
incredible. From
Elizabeth
him in this.
Olsen does a wonderful little performance choice there, because you think about it, she's been told that everyone's fearing her at the moment, and she has to stay locked down. And for some guy to go, "I know you too. You're great." She does this little smile in the background of that shot that is just like, "Oh my god, I'm not a monster." It's really nice.
Mm-hmm.
I love the moment as well when he goes, "I believe this is yours, Captain America," about his shield.
Oh, and passes him the shield. That was cool. So good.
Yeah, I love all of Spidey's fight with the Winter Soldier. Well, not Winter Soldier, Bucky and Falcon. The whole, like, "You've got a metal arm, that's so cool." All that sort of stuff. I love all that.
I love when he obviously when he fights Captain America as well. He says what we've all been thinking. As Cap throws his shield and it bounces off about 4 other things and lands back on Cap's arm, he's like, "That thing does not obey the law of physics at all." Brilliant. Because it fucking doesn't.
Definitely not.
It's a lot of fun, but if I sort of scrape past the surface a little bit, I see some things that would bother me if I let them.
Yeah. Okay, don't let them. So, continuing on, Stark discovers evidence that Barnes was framed by Zemo and convinces Wilson to give him Rogers' destination. Without informing Ross, Stark goes to the Siberian Hydra facility and strikes a truce with Rogers and Barnes, unaware that they were also secretly followed by T'Challa. They find that the other super soldiers had been killed by Zemo, who then shows them footage that reveals that the automobile that Barnes had intercepted in 1991 contained Stark's parents, who Barnes then subsequently killed. Colin, it's a question again we've asked a couple of times recently in other episodes, but I'll ask it again. Is it too dark?
Hell no. These are the bits that I like. Keep that darkness coming. The less for kids, the better for me. I like, I mean, I get it. I'm not a dad. I don't have, like Rob was saying, he's watched this film now and he has a slightly different take of certain bits. And I'm sure whenever I decide to have a child, maybe I'll watch these back and be like, "Oh, it's just a miserable piece of shit now I'm a dad. I see everything in a different light." But I'm not there yet. So to me, it's like, if I'm watching a film, I want to watch some real shit. And this is the kind of stuff I'm into.
That's the real shit. So yeah, like the shot of the Winter Soldier approaching the passenger side of the car and him putting his hand around the neck of Maria
his
Stark.
Human hand as well.
His human hand.
Nice.
It's even worse, isn't it?
I thought comic book movies were kids' films. Rob, is it tonally too far?
No.
Yes.
It's brilliant. The whole bit where, talking of continuity, and it's a bit of continuity that you wouldn't have considered until this moment, but Bucky punching Howard Stark and Howard Stark saying Sergeant Barnes, like he hasn't seen him since Cap 1 when he was a young man, and he recognises him still.
Because he potentially would have put him forward for the for the Super Soldier Serum before they went for, obviously, Steve Rogers. He would have recognised him from way back then,
Yeah, and he sort of thinks, because obviously he was part of Cap's crew, he would have met him, but you don't think about that until he says those 2 words of just Sergeant Barnes, and you're like, holy shit. His last words were that before he got punched, repeatedly in the face until he died.
Yeah. And Rob, this whole twist, this information was actually given to us way before, hidden away in Winter Soldier, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's on old cheeky Arnim Zola's computer screen. When he's like, Hydra have been under the surface for years.
Like orchestrating many events, and then suddenly a picture of Howard Stark saying the Starks die in a car accident or something like that.
Yeah.
And it insinuates there that it was Bucky.
Which also hints that's where Cap found out, and he's always kind of known from that moment.
Yes. So, Rob, would you have preferred a fight involving Bucky, Steve, and Tony versus the 6 super soldiers, or is the freeway fight scene the better way to go? Were the Disney executives right in thinking the finale should have been the three Avengers resolving their differences.
They should have just met a compromise and said, look, we're going to do the end we want, but you have to do a toy of Howard Stark's battered face. Like post-car crash Starks.
Brilliant.
You have your toys. We have our ending. Everyone's happy. Get Mattel on it.
Lovely. Brilliant. We will get to you in a minute, Colin, because enraged that Rogers kept this from him, Stark turns on them both, leading to an intense fight in which Stark ends up destroying Barnes's robotic arm and Steve Rogers disables Stark's armor. Rogers departs with Barnes, leaving his shield behind him. Satisfied that he has avenged his family's deaths in Sokovia from the Avengers' actions by successfully fracturing them, Zemo attempts suicide, but he is stopped by T'Challa and taken to the authorities. So, Colin, feel free to talk about certain aspects of this fight scene that you liked as well, but also, will we ever see the day that Tony and Steve see past this horrible situation, or as writers, should they keep it that they are as a pair?
Well, I distinctly remember thinking there's no coming back from this now when I was watching it, but maybe that was a little, maybe I was just in the moment at the time. I don't know what's coming. There could be things happening in the future that are way above what this is, what this is about. But
yeah,
clearly, I mean, it's a massive moment for Tony Stark to.
Yeah.
And there's that line about, I don't know what the lines are, you guys can throw them out. I've only seen the film once, but it's towards the end of that fight scene where I think it's Cap who says, but he's my friend, and then Iron Man says something like, so was I, or so
was I.
Yeah, that's good shit, man. I like that a lot.
It's good shit.
That fight scene for me was, again, that's bigger, more impactful. There's more behind it for me. There's more on the table. So that was sort of a good climax for me.
Yeah, Rob, this fight scene at the end, I mean, surely it's the most emotionally charged sequence we've seen so far in the MCU. Does it work for you as much as it does for me?
I love everything about, from the moment they walk in that room and you see that the super soldier's got the bullet in their head onwards. I'm in. There's a brilliant Daniel Bruhl bit which I've always maybe taken for granted and just glossed over because there's so much else going on. But he's staring at Cap from behind that blast door and he says, there's a bit of green in the blue of your eyes. Oh, just such a brilliant line.
He finds a flaw.
Yeah,
in
nice
Captain
to see
America.
a flaw. Robert Downey Jr.'s performance during that tape playing, and also Sebastian Stan's performance as Bucky.
Of him knowing I'm fucked.
And also knowing what that tape is and what he has done. Because as he says during the fight, I remember all of them, is you don't look at it and go, oh, Bucky is a dick. You're like, he's tortured by this as much as Tony is. It's brilliant. It really is brilliant.
And just as Steve is trying his best to stop Stark from doing what he's doing, and even as a viewer, you're like, I get it, but don't do this. Stark says the line, he killed my mum.
Yeah.
And at that point, you're like, yeah, okay, get him.
It's like, I don't care, he killed my mum.
Yeah. Perfect line. So simple, but
we was talking about in the Iron Man 3 episode that one of their proposed openings for that film was to see a young Tony Stark catching a firefly in his hand and giving it to his mum and seeing it glow within. Can you imagine if they'd gone with that? I mean, this scene works with that anyway, without it. But if that had been the opening of Iron Man 3, so you'd further set up his relationship with his mum, and then we had this. Like, I think it could have hit even harder. I mean, it hits pretty goddamn hard already, but...
And from an action fan's point of view as well, there's that one incredible, almost like a one shot, where the camera's completely still as well, where you've got the three of them. I think it's Bucky, then Stark in the middle, then Captain America on the right. And so much is happening, and they're throwing shields against each other. And And then suddenly it all just goes into slow motion. And then I think it's Zemo's voiceover goes over, suddenly just saying, like, when he realizes that he's kind of won, he's made the empires can crumble or something like that. Men more powerful than me have tried, but if I can make them crumble from within, then I've done my job. And then he's listening to the voicemails. Obviously, we don't know their voicemails throughout the whole film. We think he's on the phone to his family, but it was the last voicemail sent to him by his family and his wife and things like that. And he even mentions to T'Challa at the time, doesn't he, something along the lines of, as we were driving away from Sokovia, I was, at peace because I thought, right, we're getting away from this battle. My son was happy because he could see Iron Man flying past the car window.
Yeah.
But then he said, like, 3 days later, after the screaming stopped and the smoke cleared, we found my father still clinging on to the bodies of my wife and my son. And you're like, it just brings it home all the way back from the beginning again of this collateral damage that they also cause, and that going on to then create the villain for this film. It's so good for me.
Yeah, he's not like a moustache twirling villain. You could look at him and go, that's a very human reason to want to break this up and to fuck it, basically.
For sure.
Yeah, I love everything about it. I think the action's brilliant, that it's Cap's always doing the defensive thing. So there's a moment where Stark tries to fly away and he grabs him by the foot and disables one boot. He's always just all about just disabling him. But they make it so brutal that moment where he's got the shield above his head and he's bringing it down, you think he's going to cave his fucking melanin.
You think,
and he doesn't. He obviously goes for the arc reactor. But it's just, it's really powerfully done. Really great imagery. And that moment where he's walking away with Bucky and Tony's kind of like, obviously the suit's powered down, so you can tell it's like weighing him to the floor more. And he's he's almost very childlike in the way he's like, you don't deserve that shield. My dad made that shield. Like, say my dad made it. And that's never been a factor in Cap before, him and Cap's relationship. Him saying, like, my dad made that shield works really well for me, I think. And then Cap just drops it.
And Colin, without going too spoilery into future things, that's a big thing. That is Cap literally saying, then fuck the shield.
Wow.
If that's what it means to you. Him dropping that shield is quite symbolic in meaning, then I don't want it. So what is Cap without the shield is going to be an interesting question. We're almost there. So in the aftermath, Stark provides Rhodes with an exoskeletal leg brace that allows him to walk again.
Sorry guys, can you hear that?
Excelsior!
And they're interrupted by a friendly but
postman.
Knock.
but not able to read postman. And it's Cheeky Stan. And he says, Tony Stank.
I said to George before you came on that I thought that was going to be your name today on the... I thought it was going to be Tony Stank.
No, we got Steve Hodges instead. Oh, Christ. And also, Rogers breaks his allies out of the Raft prison. So, on the surface, it seems like there's a hint of a happy ending here. But if you really think about it, Steve Rogers has just broke all of these guys out of prison, which means they're now all wanted criminals. So then, Colin, how does an Avengers movie work now? Are you at least excited to see what's in store for all of our characters next then? I'm pretty sure you've already said you are.
I mean, I'm excited for an Avengers film because you said at the beginning that it's the same dudes, right, that did this one.
So the next time, it's not a spoiler to say, the next time we see the collaborative duties of the Russo brothers and McFeely and Marcus, it will be an Avengers movie.
Then I mean that alone is enough for me to be interested in it.
Okay.
I don't have a clue how it's gonna go, but then Thor's out there, and there's a whole other universe with shit going on. It might be that might bring them together in a way because there might be bigger things going on. Who knows?
Who knows?
But who knows? Yeah.
We'll find out one day. So, any final thoughts, lads, or anything else you want to go through? There's a couple more things I wouldn't mind going through, but I've pretty much said all of the things I need to.
One thing that I want to bring up that we didn't sort of get a chance to mention earlier, and that is, we talked obviously about how great Robert Downey Jr. is in this film, but one thing I learned from the audio commentary facts was that the pens that he gets Cap to sign, or asks Cap to sign with, they're like Roosevelt's pens or something. They're in Howard's archive, which is another way they kind of keep Howard Stark throughout the plot.
Yeah.
That was Robert Downey Jr.'s idea, to use those pens and have that device. So he was actually very involved in this. So what he would do is, a week before any of his scenes were filmed, the writers and the directors would have dinner with Robert Downey Jr. and run through the scene as written. And he would, in character, improv additional things, bounce ideas around with them in order to build it into something fuller. And that pen moment was one of those things. Just,
I love him.
Incredible. He is Tony Stark.
He is Tony Stark. One thing I want to go through, I did mention it at the beginning that I love 99.9% of this movie, except the one thing that can go fuck itself. So it really winds me up, because to me, one of my big things at the heart of the MCU has always been Steve Rogers and Peggy Carter. Every time I think about them, I get emotional about that last scene between them and the first Captain America, about the whole, I'll meet you at the Stork Club for the dance and whatever, and then obviously all of that is horrible. So we get introduced, we find out that his neighbour from Winter Soldier is actually Sharon Carter, her niece. So if Peggy Carter is the love of his life, and bear in mind, she's just died as well, what the fuck is he doing kissing her in this film?
It just doesn't work.
It does not work in the slightest.
It adds nothing.
Nothing to the film. You couldn't even call it a romance subplot.
She gave back their stuff, gave back the shield, the wings, all that stuff, and instead of the kiss, he said she'd be proud. Bosh.
Done.
Sorted. Same scene, same end goal. Instead, you haven't got a weird, well, the love of my life's dead.
Kiss her niece.
Great grandniece is pretty fine.
She's
I
a
took a trip
house.
to the
She's a
year
smoke show.
2000.
Smoke show, whatever. Right, I'll be honest. In the last couple of years, the Russos have come out and said, "Yeah,
They fucked up.
We got that wrong. That was
interesting.
weird." Yeah, they fully have now see that was very strange. So at least they admit it. But
Everyone's kissed someone they shouldn't have.
Yes.
Oh,
very
yes.
True. So yeah, any final thoughts, lads, before we go into like the ratings and stuff like that?
I do actually, and this is probably going to be the second thing that's going to upset you guys and also annoy the entire fan base of the MCU. I really didn't rate Chris Evans in this film. I thought the majority of the scenes he was in, he looked bored. He was honing it in, and the fact that this is a Captain America film. And if you rewind the tapes, how many times have we mentioned anything that he's done in this film that's of any note, that's of anything big? Maybe the fight scenes, yeah, but that's a stunt double. I just don't think he was that great in this.
But he held on to a helicopter as it was flying away, Colin.
Yeah, but I didn't cream my undies like you did for that bit. I mean, I remember saying to you boys as soon as it finished, I went, how can you call this a Captain America film?
Yes.
This is Avengers Civil War. Like, and even you said, like, Tony Stark had, 5 minutes less airtime or something you said earlier?
Screen time. Their screen time's just 5 minutes difference.
And yeah, I just didn't really rate him.
I think Captain America as a character needs to be quite composed, and he doesn't need to have the big acting scenes, and maybe that can be construed as, I don't want to say boring, because I love Steve Rogers as Captain America.
No, but I loved him in I remember really in the first one, I remember thinking his acting and his portrayal of Steve Rogers was like a very big, strong point for me in that film, and in the second one. But for this one, he just felt like just non-existent.
Interesting.
Sorry,
Rob, help me out.
No, I can kind of see where Colin's coming from a little bit. Like, I still love the film, but it doesn't really feel. If in terms of the cinematography, the tone, and things like that, it feels like a Cap film. But I think maybe where there are so many characters that don't fit into that tone, and there are just so many things to juggle, that it doesn't necessarily feel like his film. He hasn't really got an arc in it.
I was just about to say that. If you looked at what his character arc would be, there's not. His sole motivation in the film is protect Bucky. And he doesn't.
He makes his decision in that
He's
first.
not a changed man. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Steve Rogers at the beginning of Civil War is the Steve Rogers at the end of Civil War. Whereas I think most other characters, especially Robert Downey Jr., well, Tony Stark, have gone through some changes and have gone through some shit.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. No. Okay. We'll keep going. What more can I say about Civil War? Like we said, this was always going to be a big episode. I've already said this is in my top 5, maybe top 3 MCU for me. Right from the beginning when we started this podcast, I've always had it in my head. I can't wait to see what Colin thinks of Civil War. I've already said it. I think it's such a turning point. It's full of deadly serious moments and also like with dramatic moments. Robert Downey Jr.'s best performance as well. There's so much more to get into, like Vision's incredible jumpers. I could talk about them all night, but we won't. Let's do ratings. So, shall we do Colin first or me and you first?
Let's go,
Rob?
Colin. I want to know.
Okay, Colin, out of 5, how was Captain America Civil War for you?
I'm going to give it a 4.
Interesting.
I'm going to give it a 4.
4's great.
Yeah? No,
Yeah.
dude. Trust me, I had a lot of fun with this one.
You
I
gave
did.
Tobey Maguire Spider-Man a 4, so
Yeah. And I mean,
That's
it's definitely
high
up there
praise.
with one of... Yeah, it's one of the... It's one of the higher end ones that I've watched, for sure. It was, like I said, it's just those few things that I've mentioned as you know,
Yep.
moments that I didn't quite like. I don't think I can go higher than a 4.
That's perfectly fine. Robert Trott.
4.5.
Ooh, lovely.
Again.
Yeah.
I gave Winter Soldier 5 stars, and my reasoning was that there was nothing in it that I didn't like. And I'd be lying, as much as I love this film, if I said there was nothing in it I didn't like. Because there are things like we just mentioned, and just little questions that it sort of makes you ask of why characters are acting the way they're acting, or, you know, we haven't even got into the fact that Tony felt guilt for accidentally killing a child and then enlists a child to help him out. Yeah, there's just a few things like, is Spider-Man signing the Accords? Or is he a vigilante?
Yeah.
So there's a few things like that I just think make it... I can't give it a 5.
Interesting.
So, George, what's your rating?
Well, yeah.
We know
well,
George's rated.
when it comes to like Letterboxd and rating films on that, the last couple of years I've realised I've been such a stingy old man. Like, there's been a couple of years recently where I've given maybe 1 or 2 films 5 out of 5. And it's kind of made me question why do I give a film a 5? Like, does it have to be absolutely perfect in my mind to give it a 5? Because that's essentially a perfect score, right? So the last week I've been really battling in my head as to what to give this, because my heart is saying 5, 5, 5 all day long. But then I keep going back to that fucking Sharon Carter kiss. And it winds me up because it was such a misstep. And maybe I'm getting soft in my old age, but I'm willing to forgive it. So I give this 5 out of 5. Because yes, like I said, 99.9% of this film I love. I'm still willing to give it a very high rating just because of that point.
I'm glad you did, because I would have been extremely angry if you had given Iron Man 3 a higher rating than this film.
I think
I've given 3 5 out of 5 so far.
I think for me, talk about ratings. A 5 out of 5 for me isn't a film. It could be a real shit film. Like Troll 2 is a shit film, but there is nothing about that film that I don't like. And I think that's what it is. It's not about whether it's technically the most perfect film ever. It's just about whether you like it 100%.
Couldn't agree with you more.
I have the same relationship with Con Air. I mean, Con Air is not a very well-made film.
It's a lot of fun.
It's extremely dicey in places, but to me, it's one of the most rewatchable films on the planet. And does that then label it as a 5-star movie? It's an interesting discussion.
It's a 5-star film to you.
Exactly.
Yeah, but objectively, maybe not.
Colin, what does a film need to do in the MCU to get that 5?
Avengers came close. That's the closest.
It came very close, right? 4.5 for that.
4.5.
Did I not give?
I've got the rankings in front of me.
Did I not give Guardians a 4.5 as well?
Yes, I think so.
I think you did, yeah.
And I would say Guardians is the closest to a 5 for sure.
Wow.
And I say that, and I know it kind of goes against what some of the things we've discussed in this episode, and also what Rob just said. But there's a part of me that feels if a film is going to be 5 stars, it has. I think maybe I'm a little too picky and finicky, but I feel like it needs to, one, stand the test of time, which you don't know until the time has been tested. 2, I think there has to be elements of almost like a genre defining, maybe like a game changing element to cinema as a whole from this film being a film.
Yep.
And the rewatchability, I think, has to be there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I have a 5-star film in my life.
Oh, just so sad.
It's not sad. It obviously makes you sad, but no, it leaves room. It leaves room for that film to get me. I'm only 32. I got
leaves room for that next Russo's Avengers
film,
movie.
baby.
I'll stick by what I said in episode 1. I still don't think there's going to be a film that I give 5 stars.
Okay,
and it's not. And I say that just because of all the things I've just said. I don't know if it's possible for there to be a film that is going to tick those boxes that I just mentioned. And also, I already have this nagging mindset of it's Disney. There's a load of corporations behind it. It's not like none of these are particularly standalone. To me, Guardians is the most standalone so far because it is so separate from the universe, and I'm sure that will come together. The only one I can maybe think of that could be close to a 5 is the first Matrix film.
Yeah,
that would be up there for me because again, genre defining, everything about it, and it stands the test of time, man. I watched that recently, and I finally watched it at an age where I actually understood what the hell was going on, and I was like, damn, this is way before its time.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be my very rough sum up of a 5-star.
We've had a few people asking, so I thought it was worth us sort of delving into it a bit.
Yeah, but again, like I kind of appreciate the fact that you guys are not as strict and a bit more like it's more about how you feel about it, and maybe I'm looking at it more as like not everyone, but maybe I need to start looking at it more of like how much fun did I have watching it to add to it. But then I just watch films in a different way, I guess.
Of course.
And I'm not quite as attached to this franchise as you guys clearly are. So,
and that's why we're doing this. We're seeing how these films work on that level.
But hey, you never know, man. Like, I'm not just going to be like, because it's an MCU film, it's never going to be higher than a 4.5. I'm not going in there with that.
If all of them are 4.5.
Dude, 4.5 is a fucking good score.
Yeah, it's good.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's fucking 9 out of 10, you know? Like, that's pretty damn close to the top. So,
yeah, if The Matrix is a 5 and you've given two 4.5s, I'm very happy.
I wasn't even expecting to give anything over a 4 when I started this. I'm totally honest with you. So you've already won me on that.
Perfect. Is it time for my weekly anxiety attack?
Oh, yes.
Trivia, baby.
Let's do trivia.
You know too much for your own good.
Now that's what I call using the old head.
George is going first this week, for sure.
I'm going first because I'm not having that happen again. But I'm going to be honest, and I'm probably setting myself up for defeat, or even just by saying this, it's okay. Like, I struggled this week, but are you ready, Colin?
I'm ready, man. Let's go.
Here we go. So, shortly before filming Civil War, all the cast were brought into Marvel Studios to have their costume fittings. Sebastian Stan, who plays Bucky, came in and had his measurements taken, tried on a few costumes. He was about 165 pounds at the time. But knowing he was involved in pretty much every action scene in this film, from the fight in the apartment complex, the breakout sequence in Vienna, the airport sequence, the final fight sequence, he, let's say, after the costume fitting, realised he might need to go hard at the gym. So then he arrived on set for his first day of filming. Unwittingly, he actually put on 35 pounds of muscle. He got so big that on his first day of filming, when they went to put the cover on over his arm to make it look like he had the metal arm, it barely fit over his hand. He had got so big that the poor costume department at the last minute had to remake the entire arm just to get it to fit on before shooting his first scene.
Damn.
Little bit of on-set trivia there for you.
Yeah, no, that was good, man. I don't think you should have been ashamed at that at all. That was a good one.
Shouldn't undersell that.
I mean, could you imagine being the crew on set? Being
the panic as well. Why is this not fitting?
Why has this big bastard been on the juice for so long? What are we doing now, No, that was good, man.
Okay.
I liked it.
So, as George mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, Tom Holland was hired very last minute, and he had very little time to adjust to the sort of magnitude of what taking on this role would mean. So when he was sitting down to do his scene with Robert Downey Jr., he was understandably nervous, which the directors assured him this is absolutely fine, because Peter Parker would be nervous meeting Tony Stark. That's all good. So they're doing the scene, and do you remember a part where Tony goes to join Peter on the bed and he says, "You're going to have to move your leg because I'm going to sit down now"? That was improvised in character by Robert Downey Jr. because Tom Holland was so nervous that he had forgotten his blocking for the scene. So that Robert Downey Jr. then improvised and did that, and apparently acted as a mentor during that whole scene of sort of like teaching Tom Holland all these little tricks, which then paid off when they were working on the post-credit sequence, which we'll get to in more detail, I guess. But when Peter Parker's talking to Aunt May about the guy from Brooklyn, Steve, that beat him up, and he says his friend was huge, that was an ad-lib from Tom Holland in the moment. Maybe some of Robert Downey Jr. had rubbed off on him.
Very nice. I like that, but they're both good. I'm not... George, I wouldn't feel ashamed of yours.
Okay.
It's this reverse psychology bullshit George is playing.
It's not.
No, I'm trying to put myself in... I like the fact that... I like the idea of Robert Downey Jr. being like a mentor to Tom Holland and helping him out on set and stuff like that. That's a nice... but I also like the... I like the... the panic that must have come across in that room when they realised that his arms were too big.
Why am I so attached? Why am I so attached to this fucking little silly trivia
I love
contest?
how much you two get into this. This is so hard. I think this is actually the hardest one for me.
Wow.
Yeah, this really is. I'm not going to look at the screen because I feel like
you can't see my puppy eyes.
Yeah, I don't want to be. I'm going with George. I'm sorry, Rob. I'm sorry, mate.
I mean, George's was good.
God.
George's was good.
Wow.
They were both very good. This was like a split decision in the MMA world. It was, yeah.
Well, then over to you guys at home as well, because Rob will be putting out a post on our Instagram page, and you guys decide for yourself who won.
Yeah, and we will have a people's champion at the end of this, as well as a Colin Brain versus the MCU.
Well, this is a back and forth each week. We were tying.
It must
last
be right.
time.
No, still.
Yeah, and then George is back up again.
Rob,
so I was hoping to get a little bit of a
ridiculous.
lead, but now George is 1 point ahead.
You came in hard last week, though, Rob.
Oh, Rob, you on the
came in-
Spider-Man one, you
Jesus.
battered me.
Yeah.
I was slightly worried. Like I thought I'd pissed you off or something the way you came in with that one last week. I was like, Jesus. Yeah, that was a good one.
I mean,
So-
arguably, I do many bits of trivia throughout.
That is true. Yeah.
I mean,
You're a trivia
you know
machine.
how to pick 'em, yeah. Can you do your Marvel money-making, whatever it is?
Jingle. Money
jingle.
shot.
Ka-ching, ka-ching, Marvel money shot.
Brilliant. Thank you for listening, everyone. If you haven't already, please review or rate the podcast wherever you listen to it. It all helps. So, Colin,
Oh shit! Yeah. What we got?
what's next?
I have no clue.
You've got a hell of a lot of choices now in terms of characters, because
Really do, right?
we've got
Yeah.
a lot to choose from. So, what could we see next? Is it going to be another new character? Are we getting a film from any of our old characters? Any characters introduced in Civil War? Are we off to space? What's
What
next?
would you like to see?
Yeah.
I mean, I want to see a Black Panther one, but I don't know if they were ready or was. I mean, there can't be a Spider-Man one because they only just grabbed Tom Holland right before this one, so there won't be a new
So
Spider-Man.
you're saying Black Panther or Spider-Man?
Yeah, Thor's still out there, man. And it would not surprise me if we're going to take a
is.
little left turn and get away from this world. I don't actually want to do that, but that's going to happen at some point.
I mean, at some point, potentially, yes. So, in our next episode, we are being introduced to a man named Stephen Strange in 2016's Doctor Strange. Colin, say bye.
Bye.
Rob, say bye.
Bye.
It's a very hopeful bye.
Next time we meet, let it be in peace and friendship.
This is as far as you're going to get tonight.
Such valuable stuff. All in a nice work.
Sweet dreams, little friends.
He's escaping. I fear we have not seen the last of him.
And as always, we're not quite just done yet. There we had 2 post-credit scenes. We will do both of them now. In a mid-credit scene, Barnes, granted asylum in Wakanda, chooses to return to cryogenic sleep until a cure for his brainwashing is found. We've sort of mentioned that before. And in a post-credit scene, Peter Parker explores the features of some new web shooters built for him by Tony Stark. So what I very much appreciate in the Bucky Barnes one, the Winter Soldier one, is obviously Steve Rogers is there with T'Challa, and they say something like, if they find out he's here, they'll come for him, and T'Challa says something along the lines of, we'll be ready. And it pans over to a massive statue of a Black Panther. Just underneath that is the city of Wakanda, and they're very wise to completely enclose it in fog. Because I love that the Russos at that point are just like, when you find a director for Black Panther, they choose how Wakanda looks like.
Yes.
We're not going to do that. And it gives them plenty of
In
freedom
the-
going forward.
Audio commentary facts. They said as much. Ryan, the
That was close.
director of Black
Oh,
Panther.
okay.
Is that a spoiler?
I'm not going to...
No,
say who
let's say,
doesn't
yeah,
I'm not
let's
gonna know
say,
who he is, am I?
Colin's not going to know him.
Okay, so the director Ryan Coogler had been picked at that point for Black Panther, and they mentioned in the commentary that that's why they did that. They said they want him to build that world and that style, so they were very conscious about not showing really anything of Wakanda other than what they do show. I really do like that. They mention it in the commentary that he was like, T'Challa goes from wanting to kill Bucky to accepted that he was hunting the wrong person to then giving him asylum and trying to heal him. Like, what a character, what a noble kind of character. It's good.
Yeah.
It's a good way they sort of give him the end to his arc in Civil War, then they kind of build on it even more in the post credit It's a nice post-credit, I think.
Yeah, I really, really like it. Colin, I doubt you've seen any of Ryan Coogler's films. He sort of really jumped onto the scene with a film called Fruitvale Station.
No.
Then he did Creed, sort of like the Rocky spin-off.
Yeah.
Definitely an extremely, extremely up and coming, very talented
Creed
director.
is right up your street.
Oh, yeah. Creed is unreal.
I need to watch Creed with you, actually. I think you'd like it.
Yeah.
Creed is so good. It was a masterstroke of Marvel to get him. So be excited. And they also, I think they got Kendrick Lamar to do the entire soundtrack as well.
Yeah, I have heard a few tracks from that record, actually.
Yeah,
the soundtrack's banging.
Yeah.
Just everything leading up to Black Panther, from us being introduced to Chadwick Boseman to get an incredible director, Kendrick to curate the soundtrack.
I mean, you couldn't be ticking any more boxes for me with Black Panther at the moment, if I'm honest.
It's a special film, that's all we'll say. And what else more can we say about the Spider-Man one? It's just more of a setup that maybe that sort of he'll be receiving somewhat of an upgrade in his next film as well. Now Stark has built some web shooters for him.
I distinctly remember when we watched it, Colin turned to us and said, "Aunt May's giving him the fuck eyes."
Yes, you did say that.
Did I? Yeah, no, there was a couple of moments of some fuck eyes, weren't there?
And on that fuck eyes note, stay safe, stay well, stay nerdy. Bye.